Welcome back to the Creating Distance podcast hosted by TA Sales. I'm your host, Tom Alaimo. Some people call me Tommy Tahoe. And each week on Fridays, we'll be bringing you an episode to break down with salespeople and sales leaders the top tips, tactics, strategies, stories that you need to get to the next level of your career and up-level yourself. So let's get into it.
All right, Mikaela Mohr, aka Mick, sales enablement leader at Uber Freight. Welcome to the pod. Happy Friday. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. First time ever on a podcast, but so this is a good first one to be on. Good first one to be on.
Yeah.
It's cold outside because it's Chicago and it's dark by 4 p.m. I have like 5 lights on in my office, so I don't look like I'm in a closet. But we're surviving. Yeah, it's good.
Excited to have you on. Excited to introduce you to the podcast world here. You are someone that you caught my attention from just some of the content that you posted on LinkedIn. And then after our first conversation, then after our second conversation, it was like, all right, Mikaela has to come on the podcast. So more people need to know what's going on in your brain. So I'm excited to one, I feel like I learn things when I talk to you, which is great. And I think other people will as well. So before we get into like all the nerdy enablement strategy, AI, everything like that, that I think will end up being part of this conversation. Maybe you can just give a little bit of a background into how you got into the world of sales, some of the early days of your career in that lens, and then we can transition over to the enablement side.
This is always the fun. Tell me about yourself question.
Yeah,
Um, I'll keep it short. So sales, how I got into sales. So when I was in high school, I actually was taking college classes. So when I graduated high school, I had my associates done. At the time, I thought I was going to be a doctor. I was like, yeah, medical field, money. And then I was like,
yeah,
I don't do needles, I don't do blood. I like will pass out. I'd be a terrible doctor. No, thank you. And then the concept of I still want to make money was in the back of my mind. And my mom was like, how about marketing and sales? And so I was like, that is a minor and a major option at my university, so I'll sign up. And that's what I did. And then I fell in love with it. And so, yeah, I went to school for sales, minored in marketing, and then I did a triple minor in entrepreneurship, professional selling, and then I did a big concentration in like consumer behavior, so the psychology of how people buy, which is very fun. And then I branched into the world and I worked at a marketing firm, I guess. I don't know. We just had a couple clients who were like, help us market. And then we onboarded some manufacturing clients that were like, we're going to trade shows. How do we sell? And then I was just giving them input and then they brought us on to consult and it just grew and grew and grew. And then I was like, this is great, but like I want to make money. So then I got into corporate sales. I lived as an SDR for a while because I was like, I can't not, take the job, take the hits, learn the hardest part before just jumping right in. So I did SDR work and then I was a salesperson. And then I was like, you know what, this is great, but my brain loves systems and planning and processing and data, I guess, for some odd reason. And then I fell into enablement and now I am here.
love it. I did not know. Is it Winona State? Is
Winona
that's where you went to
State
school?
University.
Winona State has a sales major
The
because there's
sales
not that many
minor,
universities.
yeah,
Oh, sales
marketing
minor.
major.
Okay.
They're known for
Still
business
though.
and they're known for nursing. Like it's actually a pretty rigorous nursing program. They're not known for football, so I hope no one hears me say this, but it's not good. So yeah.
Do you remember in any of your sales classes, did you have to actually sell something? Like, did you have to go out and hit the streets and like pound the pavement at all?
I
Like any?
Oh, I did competitive sales competitions. Like I used to travel. So like companies like Purdue and Gartner and
Yeah.
Adobe would fund, and then you'd have to go and actually mock out an entire sales process from cold call to close. So I used to do that competitively. I might have won first place a couple times, which helped definitely propel me into sales a bit. Yeah, it was fun. And then we had to do tons of capstones too. Like honestly, it was a great way for local businesses to get free marketing consulting because they would just come in and be like, hey, students, you're going to make a plan. And then they got free plans and execution. So a
Mm,
lot of hands on. Actually, my life goal, as of right now, everything changes, is to go back and teach at some point because my
mm,
best professors had actual experience versus my professors that had just textbook experience. and it was
Yeah.
unmatched. The dean at the college at the time, she was a legend. I actually really looked towards her in terms of like what she did with her career. And she went and she sold. She was an absolute killer in the sales game and then went back and taught. And it was just like, she produced some really solid salespeople, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, anyways, went upstate. I'll shut up about that now. But yeah, it was a fun
Well,
experience.
I think the best teachers are ones that have done the whatever the topic is,
Yes.
versus they're just educated on. Like I could go read a bunch of books on, I don't know, carpentry or something, or like cooking,
Yeah,
and then tell you the best way to boil an egg. But if I have not spent the 10,000 hours practicing how to boil the egg, it just doesn't
exactly.
hit the same. And I think,
No.
you know, coincidentally, I feel like that lends us to a segue towards enablement, because I feel
Oh,
like
for sure.
there's a distinct difference that I feel walking into a company and walking into a conversation when the
Mhm.
enablement leader, you know that she or he has carried a bag. You know they've hit quota, they've missed quota, they've been paranoid and anxious about whether or not they're going to hit their quota. They've gotten kicked in the teeth verbally on a cold call, like that, versus just someone that knows how to put a learning program together, or some other background, to me is one of the biggest differences in the success of enablement rollouts and training rollouts at a company that I see.
Actually just talking about this with the different company on site we were at, where it's like if you've sold and then you go into enablement, I think it gives you a different layer of credibility. And I also think it helps reps feel more comfortable in actually telling you things. And in
Mm,
enablement, I don't think I would have been as successful in building some of the stuff that we've built in the last year if I didn't have true rep feedback. And I feel like they can give me that feedback because I understand a lot of what they are going through and have gone through. I mean, like it's end of year, everybody's the pressure's kind of unmatched. But yeah. And then I think you also have a deeper understanding and compassion for when performance is low versus high.
yeah.
Where like I in my corporate experience, leadership especially, they just look at the numbers and they're like, you're not hitting it. What's wrong with you? Versus there's so much that goes into seeing impact or like actual net revenue at the end of the table. And I think a lot of that's forgotten when it's not from a quantitative standpoint. So it's nice to also be that voice sometimes too.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you walked into Uber Freight,
Mhm.
were you like one of the first enablement hires, or did they already have a team there? And what was like the initial stages of what enablement looked like?
When I started, there was one individual who was running the show, very funny guy, one of my favorites. I think there was someone else on the team prior, and then they transitioned to like one of the different Uber families. Um, and then yeah, it was like very lean. It was one guy, and then I came in, and it started. I remember he was like, "It's a little busy right now. It'll chill out soon," and it has not chilled out since. Like I constantly sprinting over a year later. Like it was my second weekend and I was training, like co-facilitating in front of all of our sales managers and all of our sellers on complete top of funnel. It was like a 2-day on-site. And then yeah, it has not slowed down. And so when I first started, it felt very foundational. It was like, how do you cold call? How do you handle an objection? Discovery
Yeah.
framework. Like they didn't really have tools in place. They didn't have Gong. They didn't have like they had Zoom Info, Sales Nav. I think they had Groove or something. It was very foundational. There was no way to track and there was no standardization. In the last year alone, it's been implementing Gong, implementing MedPig, pipeline, how do we do deal reviews, and like way, way more. So it's kind of fun. I was just said this earlier today. I feel like I thrive when I have a problem and a hammer. And I think Uber gave me the space to do that this past year.
Yeah. So in a situation like that, where the
Hmm.
enablement team is super lean, a growing part of the business, and a lot of different things to take care of, you walk in and say, "Wow, we've got to get back to some of the fundamentals." How do you work on prioritization in a situation like that? Because there's really only so much that you and maybe you plus one person can get done, in a without going crazy and working 100 hours a week. So how do you focus on the prioritization piece of this?
Depends on your leader. Where
Yeah.
if you're in an organization that's very reactive to enablement, you're going to become requests. You're going to become a support function. Versus if you have a leader, the VP at the time, she was fantastic, who, saw a problem and wanted enablement to co-fix it with ops, with sales leaders, and then you were collaborating from the very beginning, I think that helped with prioritization because you were looking at business impact and business priorities first versus whoever had the most seniority, they just got to pick what we worked on. And so I think it depends on your leader, and that's why it's so important to have a strong leadership team. And I think if I could go back to, I wish we would have been a little closer to metrics. You know, everyone's just like, what's our revenue goal? Work towards that. And they don't work backwards and find very specific things to measure themselves against. Whereas if you can find metrics that are tied to like business initiatives, way stronger. I mean, if you think about like when we tell sellers to go to market and how they prioritize deals to try and get as much wallet share up front, or an expansion deal and you're trying to get more business, you tie what you're selling to what the business is focused on. It's an internal sell. It's the same thing. A little harder because you have more internal relationships that are already pre-established and it's hard to change people's minds sometimes. But in terms of prioritization, I think it depends on your leadership and how you're measuring.
How do you find that? Is that just a one-on-one conversation with the sales leader? Is it fairly obvious, or do you have to kind of like wring it out of them, or how do those conversations go?
I feel like I had a unique perspective because I got to come in while they were building the ship and flying it at the same time. And so I would say it's a conversation. Like I spent my first month alone, besides training, just meeting all the senior leaders. Like, what is a pain point for you and what could be better? And then being realistic of like, what can enablement do to support and what can we not? Because yeah, it's 2 people. And then it became 2.5 because we got a really killer contractor that has been super helpful. But and even as the team has grown and grown and grown, it's kind of the same focus, right? It's like what matters most to the business, and that's what we focus on as much as we can. Yeah, so I'd say conversations. And then also when you're interviewing your stakeholders, it's not just like, what's a pain point for you, but like MedPay, what metrics do you care about? How are you measuring that? How do you know if this is working? How do you know if it's not working? It's just like the same approach to sales. You're just doing it internally. And then that's how you come up with what your solution's going to be, which makes it easier to pitch, propose, and actually execute.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to call out, I was going through a few of your LinkedIn posts ahead of this conversation. And one of the ones that I love how tactical you are and the systems thinking behind it. And one of the posts that you wrote, I won't read the whole thing, but I'll give kind of the TLDR of like, if I were starting over day one as a sales rep, there's 3 habits that I would build. One is to get obsessed with my ICP, credibility equals currency. Number 2 is that Gong becomes my coach for feedback. And number 3 is to build a problem log so that you know more about the pain of your customer and prospect versus just the features that you sell to. And I feel like I found my kindred spirit in that LinkedIn post. Like that's the golden ticket. So I'd love for you to just elaborate on those 3. Especially for anyone that might be listening that's newer to, maybe not even newer to sales, but just newer to a different role or a different industry where you do have to pick up a lot of those different things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that post is what got a bunch of people to connect with me and reach out, and that's kind of what started like maybe I should post a little bit more. Like it was kind of fun. I mean,
What
it's
made you
like,
want to post that in the first place before
say
we
that
even go
again.
further? What made you want to post that in the first place? Just you had some knowledge that you're just like, I should just start sharing this out.
I was over caffeinated on the walk to the office from the parking garage, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try this. But I think what also prompted it is like I'm on the other side of the table. I don't have a hardcore quota. I don't have this external facing pressure that salespeople do, but yet I'm expected to support them with that. And I think again back to our conversation of like having that seller experience, you can relate a little bit more. And so as I'm thinking about like at the time our SDR team and our sales team and the goals that keep just growing and how everyone's performing, I don't know, it just kind of stuck out to me, especially because as not just enablement, but the entire sales world is changing so fast. Like I was at a Gartner conference and they said, I forgot who said it. I wish I could quote him, but he was like, AI is literally the industrial revolution at the speed of COVID. And I was like, that's so well said. Like actually, because like during the industrial revolution, nobody knew that they were in the industrial revolution until looking back. and just looking at how fast the world is changing and AI this and AI that, I just felt like sellers are bogged down. They have expectations, coaching from managers. They need to do this. Gong is a very big success like component, but also it opens eyes and it just adds so much to a seller's plate, you know? And so sometimes it's really just like strip back down to the basics because the basics work for a reason. So that's kind of what, promoted that post. If I were to go back and like dig into the post, I had to pull it up because I was just trying to remember what order I put it in. Getting obsessed with
Yeah.
ICP. This to me is like in the world of AI, right? We have the ability to research and become very hyper focused on who's on the other side of the table during that first conversation. And if you aren't doing that and you're showing up asking the most high level questions, you're immediately like pulling a lot of strategy off the table for your long term deal. But in the same idea, like buyers are doing the same thing. They're also showing up to the conversation educated about who you are way more than they used to. I forget the actual stat. I was talking to a leader at G2 about it. But it's upwards of like almost 70% of buyers will show up actually knowing who you are. And
Hmm.
so you have to not just understand what they're looking for, but what they're looking for in their job function. Because when you think about a successful deal, right, it's multi-threaded, you have buyer access, and your discovery isn't shallow, and you can be very tactical about that. And so when you're trying to understand who are the buyers I'm going after, what are their pain points, how would my solution play into that? Um, I just think it's so impactful and so important, and it makes them feel seen, especially when like you're a young professional selling in the logistics industry to a guy who's been in his career for 50 years. Like, you can't show up to the
Tough.
table and build credibility any way better than to be able to speak their language and understand what they care about. So that's kind of where that came from. And not just understanding your ICP, but understanding how they speak, right? Like they're going to have their own terms for things. They're going to have their own teams and own functions, and you have to use their language. Um, yeah, I would say the second one, Gong becomes my coach. Whether it's Gong, whether it's an AI coaching tool, whatever, the data in there in terms of like, I get off my discovery call, here's my call recap, write my follow-up send, that's powerful. But like, ask the system how you could have done better, especially if
Mm.
your enablement team's built out the scorecards and help train the bot on what good looks like. Always be learning, like some very top sellers, I feel like think they hit their peak and they're like, oh, I already know everything. I'm just kind of rolling with the punches. And it's like always be learning because things shift so quickly. Um, and it's just good to make sure that you're at the top of your game all the time, especially if your manager isn't coaching, which I know is another big conversation we were having earlier. Um, and then, yeah, the problem log. I think it goes back to speaking in the buyer's language. Like, this is their pain and this is how we fix it. But the problem is when we go to position, you see this everywhere. You go to position and you're like, I have a pain with cost. You're like, our product, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, shut up. Like, you need to stop. Don't be pitching and don't speak about the features. Don't be like, well, our tool does this, this, and this, or our solution does this, this, and this. It's like, what's the outcome if I actually purchase you? What's in
Hmm.
it for me if I actually choose your system versus someone else's? And you do that through speaking about outcomes. And you do that through storytelling, right? This is
Yeah.
what someone else's challenge was, and this is what we did about it, and here's what they got out of it. And so if we were to work with you based on the pains that you shared, this is how I would want to look at approaching it. And then you're driving that urgency to keep the deal moving. Because discovery to opportunity conversion, I would argue, is one of the most important areas of the pipeline. And one of the most
Hmm.
also overlooked areas of the pipeline. So that's kind of where all of that came from.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think along that lens, when you're talking about the problem, what I find is that a lot of sellers jump to, they start, someone opens up about a top level, like, surface level problem, and you just jump to, feature selling versus, okay, let's just like sit in this. Let's both be a little bit uncomfortable and like let's sit into the pain here and like let's just learn. I don't need to talk about, Uber yet. I don't need to talk about what we do yet. Like tell me, I want to learn more about that. I want to, get to, a deeper level of pain. Who else feels that pain? What's the impact of that? What metrics suffer from that? And like really get to know their world. And to
Yep.
me, if there's one piece of this that is the focus of all three of those areas. It's just like whoever knows the customer better ultimately wins. Whoever can like just know everything about not like that one individual customer and like their birthday and stuff, but like
Yeah.
know that persona and what they care about and what their day to day really really looks like. That is an unmatched, underrated skill set of a salesperson, that can take you so far. And the only way to get there, I think, is really through curiosity when you're talking to those people and you're doing your homework. you know how do I find the podcast that my buyer listens to, and what books do they read, and where do they live, and what communities are they a part of, and who do they look up to learn, and so on and so forth. And I think, to me, that's the way to really try to get under their skin, so to speak, and be able to understand what's going on.
I forget what the actual term is called. This is something that I learned when I was in one of my sales classes at college. We were talking about the evolution of sales and how in
Mm,
the past, prior to the internet, right, which I feel like we're in another evolution because of AI, but prior to the internet, it's like if you wanted to go buy jeans, there was like two stores you could go to because you couldn't really research where to go. And you could go there and they could literally like punch you in the gut. But it's like, this is where the jeans are. I guess I have to buy them. Versus now, the buyer has so much on autonomy and ability to research and become very picky about who they want to work with, that relationships have never been more important, right? Like people
hmm
aren't just buying, oh, Uber Freight, they're buying working with me. And so I think that's kind of overlooked, to your point. And not just understanding their pain, right? There's two things that you said. One, the pain piece, and two, understanding that person individually. Not just understanding the pain, but making them feel it. Like I always called it water on the laptop. Like make them feel the pain of not making any differences. Like if they don't change what they're
mm,
saying is a problem, what will that look like compounded in a month, 2 months, 3 months? How much money are they going to lose? And then you speak about that pain in their language, right? CFO, money, operations, overturn of their freaking employees, like CRO, CCO, it's like attrition of customers. Like you just have to make them feel the pain in a way that they understand and care about. Because the other thing at the end of the day is we're all trying to make money. And so when I'm talking to
yep.
a buyer, it's like, how do you make a bonus? Like if you're not in sales, you don't make commission, but you probably make a bonus at the end of the year. How are you going to do that? And how do I make that more achievable for you? Um,
Yep.
and then the second piece too is not just building the relationship with that person up front, but like as deals progress, especially enterprise deals, they become complex and the table might expand from 2 people to 10 people. And how do you have a relationship at the individual level as well as with the room, and being able to be like, Rob cares about this and his pain point is this and Teresa's is this and she cares about this, but as a collective, these are our top initiatives and how we're approaching them. A very underrated art that I think gets overlooked, and it's why a lot of deals hit proposal and then we don't actually articulate the value and then it just dies, you know?
Mm. I do know. I do know. We talked to we've we've tinkered around AI long enough. So I'm curious, what do you think about AI as relates to enablement in its current state, and anything that you've been doing, trying, succeeding at, failing at, and any thoughts that you might have on where that's all going in the future?
Oh my gosh, I have a love-hate relationship with artificial intelligence. Oh man, from a sales perspective, I think AI can really help get your A players selling more and not doing admin stuff. Like,
Yeah.
if you are an absolute beast, I want you in front of twice as many customers, not worrying about a CRM field that has 250 character maxes. Like,
hmm
will help you with that. So automating information is a huge, huge focus. I suppose automating workflows, like what is the seller workflow? Where does the tech fall within that? And what can we automate and make sure the communication is synced between all of it? My hate relationship with AI is a lot of the information from different tools will look different. And now we have an abundance of data and it doesn't always sound the same.
Mm,
And we were saying this earlier, like sometimes too much information is just as bad as no information because you don't know where to begin looking. And so AI, I think, is very efficient, but if you aren't proactive in what could go wrong, right? Like there are tools that are going to overlap. And if you have tools and you give your sellers access to said tools, they aren't going to know what tool to use when, and then they're just not going to use the tool at all. Right. And now you don't have
hmm
adoption, you don't have the data. And then, yeah, automating sellers to dos. I have mixed feelings on automated outreach. I don't know how I feel about it yet. I think there's a time and place for it. Like when you look at a territory, you're always going to have low hanging fruit. That's just like, we need to cover this, but there's probably nothing there. I think that's a great use case. automating your tier 1 top intent like personas, I definitely would not do at all. I think it has a time and a place. I think my experience with AI has been more on like a RevOps side. Like when I was at this conference this week, everyone was like, "Are you an engineer?" And I was like, "Is that a compliment? Because I don't know." You know, but I think it's so powerful. But I also think it's blurring the lines between like what is RevOps, what is enablement, where does biz tech come in? Like it's kind of taking down silos, which is great, but then it makes the work a little blurry too. So lots of content there, but I love AI and I don't like AI. It just depends on what aspect we're talking about.
Can we debate your post from the other day about AI call recorders?
Please do. Okay. Here was my thought process. I was talking to a friend. She
Yeah.
we were on the phone and I was getting lunch and she was getting coffee. And we were talking about this idea of being present in calls because you can see it. You can see people tap hopping, Teams messaging, whatever. And I was like,
Yeah.
sales calls, external facing, absolutely. The data there, unmatched. If I was a seller, I would have a call recorder every single time, especially like once the NDA is in place, as much as the customer will let me. Internal calls, TBD, because I feel like it almost promotes that behavior of like, oh, the call recorder will get it. I'll know what I need to do then. Or I don't need to go to this call. It's being recorded. I'll just read the notes later. When it's like, you might be missing some stuff that's not in the recap. So I don't know where I fully stand yet. Like I have 1,000 sticky notes all over my desk still. Like I still have to handwrite. But tell me your perspective. I'm actually very curious.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, from working at Gong, I am all in on it being like with customers,
Mhm.
100%, no doubt about it. See, I actually find that there being a note taker to me means like you should, in theory, maybe this isn't always true. In theory, you should be more present, right?
Sure.
Because I've always got my notebook here, and I've written down a few things since we've been talking. But if we were on a sales call, I might still jot down a few things, but I know the notes are going to be there and help me coordinate. I think that should only help people. Um, I think my other hot take that I wasn't thinking about till you brought it up is that like does everyone really need to be on all those internal meetings? Or like, is it cool if I catch the recording since I was just going to be listening to that one anyways? And like, I wasn't, in certain cases, you're not asking for my input. I'm not really contributing. I think everyone's been on those types of meetings where it's like, why am I here for 30 minutes? It could have been 4 minutes. It could have been a Slack message. So I'm very keen on it. And I think it does help me to then outline, okay, what were the real takeaways? Obviously, then you can go watch back and how did you do and all that type of stuff that we know from those types of tools. So um I haven't heard it be a negative. I think the negative is uh and I've turned it off in cases like this, if like internally, are we gonna have a more sensitive conversation? And as a leader, are we going to talk about personal things? And like people don't want to share that on a recorded line. Obviously, if something's going on in their personal life. And this might segue to one of our final topics, which is pre-recording. You talked about enabling managers like a frontline leader and the thought of are they coaching the deal or are they coaching the person?
Yeah.
In my experience, the coaching the person is a lot more important. It's also a lot tougher. Like a lot of leadership is talking like things happen in people's lives and like people families get sick and they get sick and they have their own challenges or great things happening in their life or it's a lot of conversations about that stuff and it's not always about like hey where are we at on this deal with Acme and how do we get this deal done. So what are your thoughts on any rebuttals to the AI recorder stuff, but also your thoughts on the
Corporate
manager?
jargon. I'm going to circle back. Every time I say something,
Circle back,
I put a
check
penny.
in.
But anyways, the pennies that I have left now that we no longer use them. But two things. I love the perspective of protecting your time. Actually, I appreciate you saying that. And I think that there's a lot of, this is very valid. It's very, very valid. Second thing, as you were talking, and I was listening and kind of like starting to conceptualize your perspective, something else kind of crossed my mind. Like the muscle of being present or not present has pre-existed beyond when AI became like a true thing. And I think seeing presence, customer facing calls specifically, isn't necessarily in the eye contact. It's not in, are you taking notes or not taking notes? Because I can't see what's in your mind. It's how good your funnel questions are. It's, are
Mm.
you listening to what I'm saying and diving into it? And it's not one ear out the other. Like, are you truly listening? Or are you just going down a checklist and you're just like, this question I have to ask and this question I have to ask? And enablement, it's all about frameworks and methodologies. And I feel like in the future, that's going to work against us because I don't want reps to feel like it is truly a checklist motion. And so I think the are you present in front of customers, you can tell by funneling. And the
Mm.
questions that they ask post the questions they're supposed to ask, you know? Anyways, that's my
Agreed.
thought. Uh,
Agreed.
Manager coaching. Oh boy. When I was at the Enablement Summit, this was such a hot topic and I love it. So I'm going to say something that might feel a little controversial, which terrifies me to say on a podcast, but I feel like some managers, especially in the mid-market space, are just top performers that got promoted. And, I don't think it's
I
a
think that's
bad
true.
thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's fantastic. But I think we have to figure out, do they want to be a manager or is that just all they felt was happening from a career progression standpoint? And that then comes to the conversation of like, manager coaching goes very, very deep, in my opinion. It ties all the way back to rep career progression, quite frankly, and where HR stands on that and the controls and the non-controls. And there's some work that I've done in that space that's been very cool to see. But in terms of the coaching itself, yes, I feel like a lot of managers and a lot of reps look at one-to-ones as just do a review 2.0. Like it's just
Mm.
not about where am I performing good and where could I be performing better. It's more of everyone in sales wants to make money. And so the time that they have to focus on what's going to make money, deals closing is where they're going to spend their time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think one of the toughest parts about being a frontline leader is that
Mm-hmm.
you don't get most companies don't get any training.
Yeah.
And to your point, I think there's a percent of companies, maybe it's a single digit percent, where the interview process and everything is really about, are you ready to be a manager and how would you coach the team and dissect calls and deals and work with, career progression. But the vast majority of the time, it's who's the best rep. They don't want to work bigger accounts. Great, you're promoted to manager. Okay, cool. Now everything that made me a good rep, actually, like, there's only 10% of that makes me a good leader. The other 90% is usually the exact opposite of the things that made me a good rep that will help me here. And so it could be a fit question. It could be also just like, how do we enable those people? And it's challenging. I think there's a lot of things that get lost at the frontline leader level. And sometimes it's just not their fault. Sometimes maybe they weren't a right fit for the role. They weren't enabled in the right way from their leadership, so on and so forth. And I think that hurts a lot of sellers that aren't able to develop. And then, how many leave companies because they had a quote unquote bad manager, and that manager was kind of screwed from the start. So I think I don't have the answer, but I see the big problem there.
Two ideas of how to approach it because I'm someone that doesn't like a problem without a plan.
Okay,
Um,
solve it.
but I don't fully solve it, but here's how I approach it. But before that, I also want to acknowledge like frontline managers are also in such a high pressure situation. You have to coach and enable and build this I mean, great company, bad boss, terrible. Bad company, great boss, everyone's going to lean that way, right? And so like you're responsible for people's well-being, but also you're in the middle being smushed down by pressure and all of this like upwards of communication. And then there's things that you can't communicate downwards, and then your plate just becomes blurry and messy. And there's just so much that they have to approach that coaching naturally falls on the back burner. Like that's just
Yeah.
from an average standpoint where it's going to land. Also, what got us talking about this at my current company was managers said they spend most of their time coaching, and then reps were saying, I don't feel coached at all. And we understand that the definition of coaching might not be universal. So like you have to define that first and foremost. To your point, education and training on what good coaching looks like. Two things of how to approach this, in my opinion. One, it is on the rep to define where they want their career to go and to provide the manager ideas of where to coach outside of the manager picking up on performance. And I'll dig into that in a second. Two, if you're going to hold your managers accountable to coaching, it has to go all the way up, literally all the way up the line. And so in terms of accountability, right? We look at reps and we're like, hey, hit your call numbers. You're not hitting your call numbers. What's going on? And we hold them very tightly to metrics. And then managers, we hold to output, right? Like, what's your pipeline size and how much have you brought in? There are still controllables within that, right? Especially if you have gone. Talk ratios. Are you letting your rep actually do discovery, or are you doing it for them? Because if you're doing it for them, you have nothing to coach on. Two, are your reps hitting their attainment? Are they actually making their calls? If not, what are you doing about it? Or if I look at a manager and they have a team of 10 people and 6 of them aren't actually hitting their dials, that's a way different story than 1 or 2, right? That's like this is a performance problem and a coaching problem, not a personal life problem. And then you have to be able to define like what can they control versus what can they not control, and then hold them accountable to those things that they can control, because then you'll see then the outputs like the revenue and the pipeline size. Two, in terms of coaching conversations, you have to give the rep something to work towards. So when you look at a lot in an organization, the few organizations that I've worked in, there's SDR, mid-market rep, senior mid-market rep, enterprise rep, right? Like that's just kind of the motion. And the idea of moving between those might not be linear, and it might not be as fast as some people want. In a lot of organizations, there's also like a comp band structure, like a P through 1 through 7, or an L 1 through 6, or whatever they're going to call it at their company. And that should be very directional. So when you look at like at our company, it's a P structure. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's HR definitions attached, right? Like P1 works well with others, like not a lot of hand holding, or it just gives very HR definitions, and they're great, but that doesn't give me action. And so something that I started to put together and propose was like, what if we actually built out skill, will, knowledge, and gave the reps a checklist so they could own their development, and then they could go to their one-to-ones with, I need to work on this and I don't need to work on this. So an example was like, okay, and I'm making this up, I'm a P3, professional 3, and I want to become a P4, right? New pay band, new salary, more money, something to work towards. As a P4, you should own this much of the sales process. You should have these skills. You should know about these products. You have sold these type of deals. You're certified in XYZ. Enablement people love certifications. Laying out things they can actionably go do, trainings they can go take that they can tie back and pull up their doc and be like, okay, I've sold these. I haven't sold these 2 deals, or I have these skills. I don't have these 2 skills. So then when they meet with their boss, they're like, hey, I want to move up in P structure by the end of the year. Here's what I have and here's what I don't have. Let's spend our one-to-ones once a month, twice a month, whatever, focusing on how I can sell these deals, improve these skills, get the certification, sell this deal. Because now the one-to-one is owned by both the rep and the manager, where they can come to the conversation with topics to be coached on, and the manager knows where to coach. Especially if they have giant teams of 10 plus people, trying to remember where everyone's at from a behavioral standpoint, it's like, it's not scalable. And so I would approach it from accountability from the manager up, and I would keep going too. So I'm a manager, 10 of my reps, 6 are in the red, 4 are in the green. I'm a director. I have 5 managers, 3 are in the red, 2 are in the green. I'm in the red as a director. My VP has 2 directors. One's in the red, one's in the green. I'm in the yellow. Like literally making it accountability. So then the VP knows how to coach the director, to coach their people, to coach all the way down. And then give the rep something they can actually action towards and show up with, and like say, yes, I have this. No, I don't have this. So you know what to coach on. That is my TED talk on manager coaching. It's so much content. I could keep going, but I'll stop now.
That is, for any of the frontline leaders that are listening to this pod, I would replay the last 8 minutes there, or whatever that was, because I think it's fantastic. And one of the reasons that I've loved getting to know you and learning from you is like the systems thinking behind that, of really trying to make things as measurable as possible. Everyone says, yeah, we want to, our reps should be better, our managers should be, should coach better, but like, what does that literally mean? How can we put that to something that's quantitative? And then how can we also suggest resources for them to improve in some of those ways? Like what how many calls should they listen to in Gone? What should they be doing for their team calls? What does a great one-on-one call look like? What does a great team call look like? Without lining all of that out for someone, if I've never done that before, how would I possibly know? Then in larger organizations, what we see is Okay, John over here is doing it, training for his team this way. Susie over here is doing it this way. And they each do some good things, but they're also completely different. And it's really hard to find a uniform process that we can point to of like, this is how we do it at Acme to create a great sales culture.
You know where you need to approach, like knowledge and skill. You can coach those, you can train on those. Will, you cannot.
Yeah.
And so being able to bucket and then be proactive of like, okay, out of 50 reps, 30 of them are not, they don't have these certifications. Let's prioritize these. Back to your question of prioritization, right? Like that's another way that you could look at it. Yeah. Anyways, take it or leave
Love
it.
it.
You
We
know?
got,
But
I'll take it. I'll take it. All right, I want to wrap with a couple rapid fires for you before we
okay.
sign off. Okay, ready?
Yes.
Number one, what goes on in the Mikaela Mohr headphones music wise?
Oh, this is gonna get people to delete, not listen to this anymore. Taylor Swift, I'm so sorry. Um, Torture Poet Department has a very special place in my heart. Noah Kahn, Hosier, Nora Jones, Olivia Dean. Those two are like on in my kitchen. Also, I'm obsessed with the movie Ratatouille. So every time I cook, I play the Disney playlist from Ratatouille. So sometimes I might just be listening to French cooking music on my walks, and that's fine.
I
Yeah.
love that. Love Ratatouille. Okay. Any sales books that you would recommend to someone, or I guess it doesn't have to be a sales book, it could be any type of book you would recommend to someone earlier in their career?
Oh man. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. I want to say it's called Sapiens.
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
a book.
yeah, Sapiens, where it talks about like the evolution of human beings and like why
Yeah.
we are the way we are. Sales is literally relationships and understanding how people function. So if you're willing to nerd out the way I did, I would look into like human behaviors and also neuroplasticity. Very nerdy, and I'll stop there, take it or leave it. But like understanding how people make connections and grow as human beings. Like at the end of the day, we're just humans selling to humans, like you were saying earlier. Like
Yeah.
learn about that.
Also helps with on brain plasticity how you can rewire yourself to be better and have a growth mindset and do things like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll stop. I won't open that can of worms, but yes.
That'll be our part two. I feel like we could each go down that rabbit hole. I'm gonna have discipline to see that we have like 3 minutes left.
Good.
Sales pet peeve.
Sales pet peeve. Hope this email finds you well. Immediately. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, love it. And then last one, what is a way that someone has caught you recently with sales outreach that's actually worked or that you've at least been impressed with?
Mental real estate. Oh my gosh, I could talk about this. Like your very first touch point. It's
Mm,
kind of controversial because some people think it's crazy to just boom, boom, boom. But when I look at like my phone notifications, and there's just so many, if I see your name 3 different times and you have a relevant reason for reaching out, I will actually respond to you. And that's like go on LinkedIn and view my profile and connect with me, and then call me and leave me a voicemail directing me to look at your email all on the first day, like back to back. If you're calling with no reason, I'm going to get annoyed and block you, right? Like, it's like,
yeah,
hi, I want to learn more about you. It's like, you could do better, like, use the internet. But if you look at your reason and you're reaching out for a reason, I will give you the time of day because that's effort, honestly.
love it. I call that the Tommy Tahoe triple touch.
But yeah, the triple touch
All
is
three
like
A's.
during our first training, 2 weeks in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, love it. Mikaela Mohr, thank you for your
Sure.
knowledge and wisdom. Want to clear the floor for you here to if there's any other final words that you want to leave the audience with, and then of course any place that people can reach out to you if they want to learn more, chat with you about Ratatouille or anything else.
No, this has been so great. This is yeah, thanks for being my first ever podcast. This was so fun.
Yeah,
I don't know, last words, like you're a person, find out what makes you geek and then lean into that. And if you can make that your job, I feel like that's the key to happiness. If you wake up and you're like, light bulb, I want to talk about this. I'm so excited. You're speaking my language. I don't know, it just makes your work more enjoyable. And if you don't have that right now, reevaluate. And I'll leave it at that. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's where I honestly live right now. I have 2 last names because I can't choose yet because I just got married. So it's Mohr and Lentz. Hoping to make a decision on that in the next couple months. So
we can update the podcast name if needed to match whatever name you choose. But for now, we'll just call you Mick. Mick, thank you
Perfect.
for joining, for sharing your wisdom with us. Hopefully, we can do a part 2 at some point, and we'll go down some of these other rabbit holes. And
This was
thanks
fun.
for joining.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for checking out that episode. 2 quick things as a takeaway. Number 1, we would feel honored if you left a review wherever you're listening to this podcast, if it's on Spotify or Apple or YouTube, to just let us know how we're doing, what else you'd like to see. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can check us out at tasales.co. Love to hear from you there. Much love. Have a great week.